Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred and I have a very special guest with me. Welcome to DeadWoodJedi. Second time on the channel, man. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. As always an enjoyable experience.
We just did a collab over on your channel, which it was really fun. It was great being over there. And today you're back to help me rebuild my clan boss team. Now we've been talking about some different compositions. The goal is to get that one key, full affinity, friendly, ultra nightmare. Because currently my team, which I actually built myself, like I constructed the speed tune myself. It's not fully affinity friendly. So the team I like quite a bit. It's this team right here. It is one key on every affinity, but spirit affinity. And there are two things that I really want to do. One is I want to detach Cardiel from this team. And so we're going to try to do that. And then the second thing is I want it to run full auto, preferably quick battle on all affinities. So that's that goal today. You're here to help me out. You think we can get this done?
I think we can. I see no reason that we can't, my friend.
All right.
I believe in you and I believe in your account.
And I believe in my collaborator today. If anybody's going to help me do this, it would be DeadWoodJedi. All right. So where do we start?
Okay. Well, first thing, look, whenever you're, and I think this is great for people to kind of go, what do I do? How do I build my own clan boss team? First thing you got to do is kind of identify your champs, and identify what's available to you. And there's definitely some champions that enable good clan boss teams, right? Like we're talking pretty basic stuff here, right? Do you have counterattack available? That's going to really lend yourself to a good, traditional style team, and might work for Unkillable depending on the team you have. Do you have Unkillable champions, block damage champions? Those are definitely things you're going to want to look at, because if you can have block damage, if you can have Unkillable, it makes building your teams so very much easier, right? And like that's absolutely, those are the two things that you're just going to want to find first if you can. It just makes everything so very much easier. I can't really emphasize that enough. But if you don't, then you start looking for other things, right? Like, do I have ally attack? Do I have speed champions? What are the other things that I can do to enable my squad? There's a couple really dedicated speed champions like Seeker, Deacon, Mashald. These are champions that can enable a 2-1 ratio team by themselves. You don't need a booster. You don't need a buffer. You don't need another speed champion. Just with one of them and the right speeds, you can make a 2-1 ratio team. And like, that's a big part of the game is, you have to do so much with so few champions. How do you stick them all in? The less champions you need to enable a team, the better off you're generally going to be. And, to have the most success in clan boss, the more attacks you take really makes a big difference. So, bringing that, I think is really, really big. So that's the first thing is, let's identify the champions that we have available to us. And then once we do that, let's identify the team that we feel is going to be most beneficial for us.
Okay, so we talked a little bit before, and we know that we have a lot of options for an Unkillable team, right? We do have the Man-Eater. I've got double Man-Eater. I've got a Demitha. I've got a Warcaster. I've got a Roshguard. I've got a Helicath. I've got an Emic. So I really have pretty much everything we need to give us flexibility in an Unkillable team. But as you were saying, the more actions you take, the more damage you get in, right? The more attacks you get in. And so going at a faster speed ratio can often generate more damage for a 1 key if you're trying to get that 1 key. And
for
so
most people to get a 1 key damage, you're going to need to go at a 2-1 ratio. And when we talk about ratios, by the way, it can be a little confusing if you're not familiar, but we're just talking about how many attacks your champions take compared to the clan boss. So if your champions take 1 attack and the clan boss takes 1 attack, then it's a 1-1 ratio. If your allies take 2 attacks for every 1 the clan boss takes, then it's a 2-1 ratio. And being able to get up to a 2-1 ratio is really one of the prerequisites, I think. Not always, there's exceptions, but generally one of the prerequisites to getting a 1 key team. And so that's absolutely something that we're going to want to be able to do if we can. And I know your account, we can for sure.
Here we are on Deadwood's site, and these are the 2-1 ratio teams. They were talking about. There's also 3-1 ratio teams that go even faster. Obviously, 4-3 is better than 1-1. So we were discussing 3-1 ratio teams because of the roster that I do have available. And Demitha is pretty much the cornerstone of most of these 3-1 ratio teams, isn't she?
Yeah, she brings two things that are extremely valuable when you're trying to go like uber fast 3-1 ratio. And a lot of these teams, by the way, like they say 3-1 ratio, it's like there's some of the champions are going at 3-1. Very,
Right.
very difficult to have an entire team go to 3-1 ratio. But one of the things that you need in order to go that fast is usually it's not just a turn meter boost, but you also need increased speed. To go at a 2-1 ratio, you usually need one or the other. And one of the advantages of somebody like Demitha is she has buff extension. So when
Right.
you put an increased speed buff on your champions and then you can extend it, that means for all three of a champion's turns, they'll have that increased speed buff. And that can really be the difference between being able to make a team work and not being able to make it work. And then on top of that, of course, she has block damage. So she can keep she's the last champion to go in your team order, that means she's going to actually be able to keep your entire team alive and stay unkillable. And this is why she's such an amazing champion, and she really enables everything that you could possibly want.
In terms of the increased speed champions that I have, you can actually create a 2-to-1 ratio or even faster with High Katoon and Apothecary. Those are speed boosting champions. But as you progress towards that 3-to-1 and you want to get that 1-key Ultra Nightmare, you want a speed buffer that brings other things as well. The more they bring, the better off you are.
Yeah.
So obviously Lydia brings you a weaken, a decreased defense. She brings a lot. We have other champions that can bring a lot in terms of damage. Zinogre is one of them. We have Razzlevarg here is another one. He can be a cornerstone for one of these 3-to-1 ratio teams. Mashalad is another champion. And then, even the new champion, Pedrag, or Podrig is his name. We haven't quite worked out all of his speed tunes, but is this a champion that you guys are actually actively working on speed tuning at the moment?
I honestly haven't been. I just hadn't really thought to do that, to be fair. It's funny that you mentioned that, because now that you say that, I go, why haven't I done that? I've been using him primarily in arena and with a lot of dungeon teams, so I just haven't really thought about that. The one thing I will say that actually, there's not really a reason why I haven't done that. This guy should work in most teams where you have, say, a High Katoon or an Apothecary, someone that's giving you not only an increased speed buff, but a turn meter buff as well. That's kind of what he does. He can be a little bit problematic though. And the main reason is actually his A1 ability.
Right.
And because that will decrease the cooldowns of random skills of his allies. I don't think it works on himself. But
no,
the hard part is with those allies, if you need someone to extend the duration of a buff at a right time, well, if the skill gets cooled down too early, then that's not going to come up at the right time.
That's a good point.
And that's one of the big things with speed tuning is having a reliable turn order with your skills is really, really important. Now there's ways to mitigate that, right? You can overlap skills such that maybe having it being maybe the reliability isn't as much of an issue, but that matters, right? Like a lot of times with these speed tunes, not just about when a buff is on you, but also when the buff falls off you, when it isn't on your champion. That can have a big impact. So somebody like Padraig, I love this champion, surprised more than I thought I ever would, but not really a great clan boss champion. A similar champion to him is actually Golden Reaper. Golden Reaper is very similar, where she also has a ally skill cooldown on the A1 ability, and that kind of generally will mess her up. It'll mess up your speed tunes because of that. So yeah, not ideal.
That's a good point. When I do takeovers and we talk about clan bosses, a lot of times, viewers will say, I'm trying to use this speed tune and it's messing up. What's the problem? And one of the first things I look for is, in the Masteries, did you choose Cycle of Magic? Because if you have a speed tune, Cycle of Magic can throw you off. And because it's only 5% of the time, it can be hard to perceive, know? But it only has to happen once. You get that cooldown at the wrong moment, and all of a sudden the whole cycle is thrown off. So, Podrick potentially might be able to fit into a speed tune where it doesn't matter about the cooldowns as much, or even maybe you want to like improve the cooldowns, like in an Infinity team or something like that. But yeah, for a regular Unkillable, he might not fit simply because that A1 could break your speed tune very easily. That's a good point.
Yeah, the other part too is I think this is actually going to be very relevant to what we're doing today, looking at your clan boss team. one of the important things to realize is that once you get to that 1 key, you're done. You don't need to do more damage. There's no added benefit to, pushing it past that number. I mean, it's fun, don't get me wrong, but you don't need to do it. So then the issue becomes, why I want to use champions that I don't use elsewhere, right?
Right.
I really want to limit the champions that I'm using. And so when you have someone like Padre, who's very good in a lot of different areas of the game, do I want to commit him to clan boss if it's going to not make him as usable in other areas of the game? And that's another consideration there. Obviously, for someone like you with a bunch of champions, that's a bigger consideration. Obviously, when you're a little bit newer and you don't have as many champions to choose from, maybe you don't care as much, and that's valid.
Right.
But yeah, he's going to be, next to impossible to speed tune, really, because of that A1 ability, and that's really the big drawback with his kit as far as clan boss goes. For everything else, it's great though. Hydra, I love it.
Right.
So
Right.
no complaints there.
So we were talking about this exactly when we were trying to pick our speed tune. Was we want to detach certain champions like Cardiel from the clan boss team. We don't want to use him because the build that I have him in for the current team is okay, but he's running a bit slow. He's only running at 245, and Cardiel could potentially do a lot better in other content running at 300 plus. I would run him at 350 if I could. And so getting him detached from this team allows me the flexibility to change his build, get him into, a better build for a cleanser, a better build for an ally attacker in other content, like maybe hard Fire Knight. Like I haven't completed that content there, and he could be a key component to that. And so as a result, we're going to try to do this speed tune that we're doing today with champions I don't really have other uses for, or champions who in their clan boss build will be extremely useful in other places.
Yes, I think that's exactly the kind of approach that you want to do. Typically what we're really focused on are speeds, right? Like if you have to have a champion at 170 speed, you're not going to be able to use them in many other areas, at least not at the level of the count that you're at, right? Like even on my free to play, I had my lead champion was at Rathalos was at 170 speed, and he worked for everything else I wanted to do, but it became really hard to push to higher levels because he was so speed limited, right? And so you want to be able to, run them at a speed that's useful. My Maneater was running at 285, and that was great. I could, that's a great speed no matter where I'm at. So it would work for him. With us, we want to kind of be doing the same thing here, right? So depending on who we want to use for damage, it's going to be dependent on, do I want to use them elsewhere? Is a clan boss build going to work for them? Or do I want to bring them into Doom Tower or Hydra? We're going to need more accuracy, or we're going to need more speed. That would definitely be an issue. We want to look at that with our speed champions, right? If we're going to be bringing in somebody that's going to be a gangbuster for Arena or a gangbuster for Hydra or something else, are the speeds we're going to be using appropriate? Is the build going to be appropriate? Are we going to be, do we have to maximize damage with everybody, or can we, skimp a little bit here or there to make it work? I think all those things are going to be big factors that you want to look at when you're building your team. Right. This, of course, if you have the options to, right? When you're first starting out, you don't have the options. You build with what you got, and so it's a bit less of a concern there. But thankfully, you have quite the account and quite the level, number of champions here. So we have some real room to kind of consider some of these options. And I think you do have a couple very valid options here as far as builds you want to do, and then definitely more than a few options as far as the champions for those builds that you'd want to do.
Okay, so I agree. I think this is going to be fun. We've talked a little bit, and we've decided on a Demitha comp, one to do that 3-to-1 ratio, and also because I'm not using Demitha in other places, whereas Helicath I could detach from my current composition and actually get some value out of him in places like Live Arena and some other places where he'd be valuable. So we're going to try to detach Helicath and replace him with the Demitha. And in addition, we're going to try to not use Ninja. We're going to try to not use Ninja because we want this to also be representative for other players, and Ninja is no longer available, so we're going to detach him as well. And we're going to also try to separate Cardiel. So this is going to be a little bit more free-to-play friendly of a build. It's still going to require good champions and good gear and all that. You can't get away from that. But we're going to try to make this a little bit more of a free-to-play friendly build, but simultaneously detach some of those other important champions for different content. And so we were discussing, I think, 3 different speed tunes, and they're all focused around Demitha, and then as our speed champion, we've settled on Elva, if I can find her. Where is she? Here she is. So we're thinking about using Elva and Demitha here as the core for this team. We haven't yet come up with everybody else. But so what are our options here in terms of the various speed tunes that you think would be beneficial?
Right. So like as you said, we're kind of settling in on a Myth-Fu team, which is one of my favorites. It's a team I run. And one of the reasons why I love it is you have room for 2 damage dealers, which is great. So you have some flexibility as far as bringing in debuffs and bringing in damage. It's a fully affinity friendly, works for all the difficulties, right? It's a killer team. If you ever build up an Eris, you'll have your rare champion to make sure you get that advanced quest down too. But not everybody has a Fushan, right? And Fushan's important for 2 reasons. 1, if you run Eris, you need a red affinity champion to make sure she doesn't take the stun. 2, he has a 24% speed aura, which is great. However, the requirements of the actual team isn't having Fushan, it's not having Eris. What you need is someone to be able to cleanse the stun or cleanse the debuffs and give you an increased speed buff. Somebody like Elva fits that role perfectly. And in a lot of ways, better than Eris could, right? And then you just want a speed aura, so you're not running at ridiculously high speeds. So Elva also has this 19% speed aura. It's not the 24% of Fushan, but it's not that different, and it can make it, really nice and easy. So your damage dealers, you don't have to run super fast, which means you can build a lot more damage on them. And so I think this is going to be the one we're going to do for that. Now, as you said, there were a couple of other options, right? There was the Mythbuster team that kind of does use a Cardiel at fast speeds, but I think you really want to play with Cardiel in a little bit different kind of range and really push what he can do. In that case, it's not nearly as helpful. We could have run it with Elva too, instead of Lydia and without Cardiel. But again, now you're talking faster speeds, and it makes you I don't think it's something that's really, really necessary to be able to do. Your DPS goes faster, so you would be able to get more damage out of it, but it seems a little bit excessive. And I think for your account, especially being a free-to-play account, where your gear is going to be a lot more valuable than mine would be, right? So I think, finding that, actually for anybody, right? Finding that fast gear, you want to be able to put that on your champions that you need it on, not necessarily to get overkill for clan boss team. And you can see like there's basically another 300 speed champion in there. So instead of doing that, what we could do is we run the Myth-Fu team. Now, the only other team that I was really kind of like thinking might be a really good one was trying to do a Batman team or a Bat Eater team, right? You have 2 Man Eaters, you got, Painkeeper. Be very easy to run that type of team, but Bat Eater teams are a little bit, they rely on 1 damage dealer. So you're a little bit more at the mercy of Affinity and, but it's a great team. 1 key, all affinities run smoothly, right? It's a very simple team. Everybody loves it. That is obviously an option that you had before you as well. So like that could have been something we run. And I know you're actually running what we would call the Dark Knight comp currently, right? Using a Renegade to reset all your champions, Seeker to give you that turn meter boost. And that's a really good team as well, with only needing 1 unkillable champion, Hellcat, I think, and then you're using Hellcat's shield for the stun. The quality team. We could replace Cardiel with a Brogni in that type of a team, I think, and get basically the same kind of results out of it. That's definitely an option for you there as well. If that's something if you're like, you know what, actually, I kind of want to keep this team, we could totally do that too. But I do think long term, the Myth-Fu team we're going to be running with Elva is probably the best option you have there. One of the other great things is the speed champion that Elva's playing. You need someone going at about 260 speed for that, and that's a good speed for Elva to run at. Right. That's going to work for other builds in other areas of this game. So, those are the options that we were considering, and I think they all could work. It really just comes down to personal preference of like, which one do I want to use? Which champions do I want to use? Do I want to use Brogni for the Dark Knight? Do I want to use Elva for the Myth-Fu? Do I want to use this champion or that champion? Depending on the team. How many damage dealers do I want to bring in? Like, those are kind of the questions. And honestly, it just comes down to personal preference at some point. And that's I think the point we're at. And we kind of settled on this Myth-Fu this Mythfu team with Elva. You sounded really intrigued by it, and I think it's a quality team, and so we're gonna try it.
I think it's a quality team. I've never run it. But I think one of the other aspects, and this is maybe the free to play part of my brain speaking, which is like, I want Elva to be usable in a lot of content. And so realistically, like I also want to build Elva. I want to get her to a place where I can comfortably say she's in sort of a final, not a final build, but like a pretty, finished build. And now I can start to put her into other team compositions. She's an incredibly powerful champion. She's really useful in a lot of places. So let's get her into this build, and that will double dip then. Not only will we get this great clan boss speed tune, but now I'll have Elva in a great build for all other content. The reason that we chose not to do Brogni, honestly, is because I'm using Brogni for different content for the channel. I have a plan for him, and so I didn't want to put him in this particular build. And then the reason that we decided not to go, with the Mythbuster was because I'm trying to get Cardiel out of that role. You're right that it's preference, but it's also like, it's not just random what champions do I like. It's preference in terms of what am I trying to do with my champions on my account as well.
Yes.
Right. So
absolutely. Yeah. It's not flipping a coin for whim. There's strategy involved behind it. Absolutely.
But everybody's going to make a different decision based on what they're trying to do with their account and their champions. Yeah. Okay, so this is the one we're going for, but the viewer should know we are replacing Eris here with Elva. Elva's going to fill that role. She's also going to take the spot of the speed lead. We're going to use her aura instead of Fushan's, and there's a slight difference there. Fushan, I think, is 24% in all battles, and Elva's 19. Is that correct? And then we are going to use the Seeker, but that means we have 2 DPS choices that we have to make. So it's going to be Demitha, Elva, Seeker, and then 2 DPS. And for right now, what I have settled on, and this may change in the future, is we're going to use Fane to bring a lot of those debuffs. She's going to bring that weaken, decreased defense, poisons. And then we're going to use Skrank, and he's going to be sort of a backup weaken as well. Because I'm in the same place with Skrank that I am with Elva. I want to build him, I want to use him, and I don't have any content for him right now. So this is what we're going to try.
Fair. Yeah,
so I think that's what we're going to try.
That's great. The other one thing I would say that's an advantage of this particular build is that it's pretty easy to replace champions, right? Like if you want to you have Elva right now. If you ever get another champion with the speed aura, you can always replace her with Eris later on, right? And you go, I really want to move to a different piece of content. Same thing with your DPS. Like you go, Skrank is going to be great for this new dungeon that just came out. Well, guess what? I can bring in another DPS. I don't need to have it be him. For this type of a build, you can really kind of play around with that some and mix and match as you need. So yeah, it should work out nicely.
And we should also mention, like, one of the considerations can be affinity. For instance, if you're going to bring in Eris, you want that force affinity DPS to take the stun because she's your cleanser. And so then somebody like Geo becomes a really good option. Or some other force affinity damage dealer. In this case, one of the reasons why I landed on Skrank is because that reduces the variability for the affinities, because he's void affinity. He's not going to do less damage against one affinity or the other. And rather than running, say, like Annex and Fane, who are both spirit affinity and create a huge swing, I'm trying to minimize the swing so it works on all affinities. And again, those are, kind of advanced considerations that you can, if you have a deeper roster, you can look at. If you don't have a deep roster, you just pick your hardest hitter, right? Like that's sort of the way you go.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's really important, like especially with a lot of these unkillable teams, is to make sure the stun doesn't go to particular champions, like you mentioned, Eris, right? Sometimes you have to worry about champions like Seeker or Demitha. And thankfully, with this particular team, you have a cleanser every turn. So as long as as long as the cleanser doesn't get stunned, and Elva has block debuff, so it won't affect her regardless. But as long as it's not the cleanser, you should be fine because they'll be able to cleanse the debuff off at the top of every turn. And you should be good to go, right? So it works out really nicely. And one of the great things about that. But yeah, otherwise, affinity has a big impact, very big impact. And a lot of times people will they'll build a third DPS, so you can always rotate your damage dealers to make sure nobody's even weak affinity for you, and you're always getting the best result possible.
All right, so should we jump in and start building these champs? Are you on the calculator right now for me?
I am, of course. I got it right over here. Just staring at it over there. So yeah, I got you.
All right, so when you're
yeah.
doing a speed tune like this, do you typically start building the fastest champion first because that's the hardest one to gear, or where do you start?
It does depend on the particular speed tune a little bit. Generally, there's two things I'm going to want to do. I'm going to want to make sure my best damage is on my damage dealer, right? So that's going to be a champion I want to focus on because I want them to get the speed, but I also want to make sure they hit hard. So especially if you have a team like a Bad Eater team, a lot of times I'll actually build my damage dealer first, right? There's only one of them, and it's vital that they hit hard. So sometimes I'll do that. With a team like this, however, because the speed, the two fastest champions are so much faster than everybody else on the team. And we're talking about a 60, 70, speed difference. That's between Elva and the DPS. The myth is almost 100 speed difference. So they're not really overlapping in gear anyway.
Right.
And if I can't make those fast speeds, I don't have a tune to bother with. So why worry about the DPS? So I will almost always start, especially with these Myth Air, Mythfu, etc. teams. I will start with my Demitha. I'll move to my Elva, and then I'll kind of go through the damage dealers after that.
All right, so are there any tweaks that we need to make here? Because obviously, Fushan, the first thing we got to do is we got to lower the speed aura to 19, right?
Yep. So first off, before you do anything,
okay,
if I have this up, so we're just gonna plug in numbers on our end. But for you guys trying to do this thing, note the true speed. That's the numbers that you need to replicate, right? That's the important part that you need to kind of record. I always just have a second tab up with the original speed tune, so I know what I'm trying to aim for. But those are the numbers you're really trying to aim for. It's not the speed, it's the true speed, which takes into account their base speed, takes into account their speed aura. So first thing you're going to want to do, we probably want to swap out the speed aura to 19%, right?
Okay.
Because that's what Elva's going to be. We also want to swap out Eris for Elva. That's going to be important. And then now at this point, you can always put in the specific champions you have, right? So if you have a Fane, you're like, oh, I know we're going to use Fane. Oh, I know we're going to use, what's the other champion that you want to bring in? Skrank, right?
Yep.
Right. You can go ahead and do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's not always really that necessary because the base speed's usually about the same. Right. And we're trying to hit to a true speed spot anyway. So it's I can get to a target spot. And then when I'm closer building, that's when I'll plug in the actual champion with the actual speed sets and all that stuff. But to be completionist, to get it, perfectly right here, this is kind of the idea that we want to do. And so now, as you can see, all the numbers are off, right?
Yeah,
speed tune's broken. Everything fell apart. And it's only just a few speed difference. But everything kind of fell apart there. So now what do we want to do? How do we fix that? Obviously, we need to, like I said before, replicate those true speeds just like we had. So I believe it was, if I wasn't mistaken here. Oh, I think I just broke my thing. I think what we want to do is we want to get the Mytha up to about 214 true speed. So I would add one more there. Elva, you're going to want to add one more speed.
One of the things I like to do, and this is just a little tip, is when I'm doing a speed tune, I like to have a tab up with the original speed tune and then a tab up with the speed tune that I'm building on, both in the calculator. So I can just flip back and forth and look at the difference. So what we want is we want these true speeds to be the same. And rather than write them down on a piece of paper, I can just say, okay, here Demitha's, the true speed is 314. Her build speed is 290. Here, I want to get to that true speed of 314, so her build speed needs to be 295. And then you can just kind of match them up, and see if you're hitting the right speeds.
Yep. I wanted to do that exact same thing. And then I plugged in everybody that we were using, and I started having problems with it. I was like, wait,
I think it's Skrank, honestly.
To the level I wanted to. No. Oh, wait. What's Skrank's? I got this. I'm not mistaken about that. Skrank doesn't have any turn meter boost, does he?
Oh, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, he does. That's why. Skrank doesn't work.
It's good fun.
And not to say he doesn't work, actually, but it's going to be a little trickier.
Yeah. So
okay.
no, that's good to point out, because this is something that can happen. You want to use a champion for a particular reason.
Yeah.
You plug them in, and you're like, why is this tune not working with everybody lined up? And you start going down the checklist, right? And one of them is like, do you have the skills in the right place? Do you have the delays properly set up? And then the second one is like, is there something happening that you don't expect, like a turn meter fill? And in fact, when we look at Skrank, that's what we get, right? What did we end up with in terms of a turn meter fill for Skrank?
Yeah, so he's got a 15% turn meter fill when he critically hits, and of course we're going to build him with 100% crit rate, and he's void, so that will happen every time.
Gotcha.
And so we have to like deal with that. Now, one option is actually slow him down to about 204 true speed. If we did that, we could use him.
Okay.
I'm trying to see how affinity friendly such a thing would be. I think it would work out okay. Looks like it would work out fine. So that's an option. I don't know that that's the best option, but it's an option. Or we bring in somebody else instead of Skrank, also an option. But yeah, you can see that. Yeah, there you go. So it works if we do something along those lines.
It does speed tune. What would be the consideration? Like, why would you say it's not a good idea to slow him down here and try him out? Like, what would be a thing that might make you not want to do that?
Go to void. Change the affinity. Well, let's see. Let's make sure it works. So this is probably the biggest reason why we don't want to use Skrank, is because he doesn't really work that great.
But what was it about it that broke? This is for the viewer's sake. What was it about Skrank that like, why did you go and check Void versus checking Spirit? Like, it works on Spirit. Why isn't it working on Void?
Okay, so like obviously on Spirit, what's happening is you're getting that that whatever turn meter reduction, right? Or speed speed reduction.
Slowed. Yeah.
Even though you won't even see it on the calculator because Elva's cleansing it or blocking the debuff or whatever, but it's still landing on those that aren't covered, right? And maybe they don't take a turn before Elva cleanses, so you don't see it on the calculator, but it's still having the effect. And that difference between having that little speed reduction and not having that little speed reduction, combined with Skrank getting his 15% turn meter boost, can make the difference. And probably what's happening is Skrank is on Spirit. Skrank is outspeeding somebody that he normally wouldn't. That's affected by that, and that outspeeding them is actually putting him in the proper turn order. When you're not on Spirit, when you're going against Void, he's just out of turn order. He's not being able to make that little jump in the turn order to get it synced up, and so that's going to be problematic. So I think this happens sometimes. You go in the calculator, you go, why isn't this working? Once you look at it, you go, oh, turn meter effect, oh, cooldown effect, oh, this thing or that thing, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, that's not going to work with this particular champion in this particular build consistently, and there's really no point in us doing this if it's not consistent. Right.
And I think so this is one of the reasons why, first of all, I wanted to have you on the channel, because the questions I get about the Clan Boss calculator are always like, I'm trying to use this speed tune and it's not working for some reason. And there are a lot of considerations, and the more expert you are, the more quickly you can diagnose that problem and figure out a fix. I would not have come up with I would have looked at this and be like, I don't understand why Skrank isn't working in these two different affinities. Because to me, I don't see that slow out there, and so I'm not thinking about the fact that the slow actually does have an impact. And you mix that with the turn meter fill, and that breaks it. So, like, you being the Clan Boss guru that you are, that kind, and you got it really quickly. You got to that in a few seconds. So this is where I think it's useful if you want to speed tune a Clan Boss team and you want to get good at speed tuning. The more you do it, the better off you're going to be. The more champions you use, the more tweaks you try, the better off you are going to be in terms of diagnosing problems on speed tune.
Just like anything else, But I will say this though, like, it's always one of three things when it comes to a broken speed tune. It's always one of three things. It's like you have the wrong speeds. You just input things wrong. That happens more than you'd think. It's not a deal breaker. It's just like that happens. You have the wrong aura. Your champion's in the wrong order. You have the wrong. You don't have Lore Steel activated, or you have the wrong speed sets. Something along the lines. Or your skill order's messed up. Right? Somebody's not booked. You have a a refresh accessory on or refresh
Right.
set on, and that's happening at the wrong time. Or you're using Padre again. We told you don't do that. Something along those lines. Or it's a bad mastery, which you had alluded to earlier with Cycle of Magic, but
Yeah.
there's also mastery that will affect turn meter, and you're using one of those things that's affecting turn meter. So like it's skills, it's either skills, masteries, or speeds. It's always one of those three things. So it's once you recognize that, then you start going down the list.
Right.
Let me look at my masteries, make sure I don't have anything problematic. Let me look at my skills. And in this situation, this is one of those other ones that comes up a lot that people don't even think about, is like maybe there's a skill in the kit that actually will mess things up, that will refresh things or increase turn meter. Ninja's notorious for this. The first rule about ninjas, you don't use ninja,
Right.
because he always breaks things, right?
Yeah.
But obviously we're finding that same situation here with Skrank right now. And so this is just something that you have to go through everything diligently, just like go piece by piece. Don't get don't get messed up with stuff. Don't get upset. Just like, let me look at it. Let me see. Does this mess something up? And with all these new sets coming in, those are obviously going to have a big impact. One of the things I know we're working on with the calculator is revamping the UI as far as the sets goes, because there's so many new ones, and they have like turn meter fill and they're getting a lot of random kind of effects in there that we need to start accounting for. And so it's challenging to put all that in there right now, but like that's something we're going to have to do at some point here.
Right. Okay, so we've got to go to decide on a different damage dealer now.
Yep.
We got to figure somebody else out.
Got to get a new one.
All right, so let's jump back.
I believe in you.
Let's jump back to the account here. And so one of the things is, if we are going with Fane, we know that Fane brings the decreased defense and the weaken. She brings poisons. The thing that we're losing from Skrank is a lot of just flat damage plus an HP burn, which would be nice to have in the kit. Or we could bring in a poison sensitivity that would maybe boost our damage. Or we just have a really, really hard hitting champion, or an HP burn activator or a poison activator. Those are ways to get a lot of damage into the team. So I'm thinking if we want to do a different affinity from Fane to again reduce that swing, maybe we could look at like, oh, here we go. We've got a great one here. Maybe we could look at Dark Kale. He's gonna bring poisons and poison sensitivity. That works with Fane's poisons as well. He does have the poison activation on his A1. What do you think about Dark Kale as an option here? Is this a good option, or should we be looking at something else?
I think Dark Kale's a solid option. When you start going at a 2-1 ratio, when you start getting all these extra attacks in, one of the things that I like to bring is raw damage. That's like my focus with it, because I feel like with the extra attack, the damage over time effects are half as important. Right? I mean, if you think about it in that way, I can, my 2 attacks, how much damage am I putting up versus the 1 clan boss turn where those poisons, HP burns are having their effect.
Yeah,
so
that
when
makes
you
sense.
talk about somebody like Dark Kale, I don't know how much benefit you're getting out of it versus somebody else. Like, does Dark Kale bring 100,000 damage per hit versus someone that could bring in 200,000 damage per hit? I'd probably prefer the 200,000 damage per hit. Just in my mind, that seems to be, more impactful. But
the thing that would argue the other way. The thing that would argue the other way would be the poison activation, that you're getting extra poison activations, right? But his activation chance is actually pretty low. I think it's like 25% per hit. So it's not like you're going to be able to rely on doing that every time. If it was a guaranteed poison activation, that would be different. Then you could know very much what you're getting. All right, so let's take a look at the roster then. Is there anybody who jumps out to you as, a damage dealer maybe that we should be leaning towards? Could be a legendary. Again, there will be some that we can't use simply because we're using another content. So that can be a consideration too. But take a look. Let me know what you think. Is there anybody who's jumping out at you?
Well, I mean, just looking at this first page, obviously the biggest jump out is Gnute, but if you use him, I'd slap you. I think it's a terrible idea, right?
Yeah, I'm not slowing him down to 175 speed or something. No,
doesn't make any sense.
No.
One champion that's actually kind of interesting that you might be interested to use, a little bit different, would be like a martyr. Counter attack won't be consistent, but you do have buff extension in there from the Mytha.
Right.
You would get that on several of your champions, and that might be an interesting way to, potentially add some more damage. It will make your runs considerably longer, but with the auto finish, it might not make much of a difference. But that's certainly an option, right? That's somebody that I think most people would not acknowledge. Yeah.
I'm sorry, do you prefer Martyr over Valkyrie? Because I have both.
100%. Well, first off, Valkyrie has some weird turn meter effect stuff that makes her kind of tricky sometimes for clan boss. You gotta be really careful when it comes to Affinity, because she gets a turn meter boost when the enemy gets a buff, and clan boss does get a buff.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Martyr, 1, hits harder, 2, brings debuffs that you can use, like decreased defense, and 3, self buffs with the increased defense, right? Now we're talking about this particular team, like an unkillable team. Martyr is one of the better champions you can bring in. For a survival team, there's very few that are better than Valkyrie, because that shield is so massive in place, right? But if we don't need the shield, which we don't because we're blocking the damage, I think Martyr is an outstanding choice, just in general.
Okay, so we can definitely consider that.
Yep, absolutely. I'm trying to think. One of the ones I tried to convince you on before, I still think is really top tier. Anax, just one of the hardest hitting epics that's in this game. Definitely somebody I would be looking at as a possibility there. Not fully leveled up, right? But it's rank 6. I think is close enough. Like I've definitely run.
Yeah, he's close, and he does have a 3-star blessing versus I think a 2-star blessing on Fane. I would be more likely to replace Fane with Annex rather than run them side by side, because they're almost mirrors. They do very similar things.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'm happy to bring him in. Yeah, I'm happy to bring him in and replace Fane with him, but that would still require us to bring in a second damage dealer.
Exactly. And like I said before, we had this conversation a couple days ago, with like Fane versus an axe is kind of like, half of one for, or 6 of one, half of the other, right? Also, I would say, like with other champions where I can see here, actually, I think scrolling back, I'm not seeing any real epics that are standing out down there. One of the ones I would look at, there's 2 actually I think that really stand out. Yes, Farrak and the Fat, absolutely. It's very hard to get away from ally attack. It's one of the strongest buffs, like, damage buffs you can bring. But on top of that, he's also bringing increased crit rate, increased crit damage, and poisons and HP burn. So he really does bring a lot to the table. That might be, I think, is probably your best choice. Same affinity, so not great in that sense of things, but I think that might just be something that we suck up and take on the chin. Yeah, this is pretty fantastic.
Okay, that was a hell of a phrasing, man.
Is that not right? Suck up and take on the chin. Oh,
that's not something my viewers are used to hearing, but okay. That's great. Yeah. So
that's. I took two different idioms and pushed them together, didn't I? That's not advised. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're welcome, everybody out there. Internet, you're welcome.
I'm keeping that in. That is not getting cut out, by the way.
Yep. I know.
All right. So I do like the idea of Farrak and the Fat. I would have to rebuild him, but he's actually not really featured in a lot of other content for me. I don't need him for a Fire Knight hard mode, which would be a consideration. Because I have Cardiel and because I'm getting Lady Mikage, I have the ally attacks I need. I don't need Farrak and the Fat for ally attacks there. So this could be a champion that I would be happy to use in Clan Boss. Again, we have that double affinity thing with Annex or Fane. But I have a champion that I've actually been dying to try out. You've never tried out before. I don't think you're that high on this champion. But there is actually a champion who brings a weaken in her kit and has an A1 that would work with an ally attacker. And that is also an epic, so another friendly champion. And this is Ashma. So Ashma has an A1 that has a chance of landing poison, so the ally attacks would get more poisons out there. She has a weaken on her A2 as well, so we would still have that. Farrakhan does not bring that, whereas Fane and Annex would, right? So we're replacing that. And she's a different affinity, being magic affinity instead of, spirit affinity. So potentially, and she does also increase the duration of debuffs. So more uptime on the weaken, the poisons, the HP burns, and all of those. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. 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 I mean, yeah, she's a champion. You know, uh, people use her. Yeah, I yeah. I'll be honest. I have not used her, so I can't say from firsthand experience.
Is this
But
is this another one of those issues where it's like you'd rather bring a raw damage champion and you don't really want to bring another debuff?
I mean, 100% that, right? First,
Okay.
first off, I don't think Affinity is as much of an issue. I don't think Affinity is enough of an issue to replace Fane
Okay.
with Ashma. I don't think they compare, right? Like, and the other part is like by having Fane, we have all the debuffs we really need. So that's not even really a consideration. Like even when we're talking for Rock and the Fat, the poisons, the HP burn, that's all just bonus.
Right.
To be frank with you, like
Okay.
it's
So
the ally attack ability. That's the
yeah.
big part with his kit that I think is worth bringing in. But yeah, she's I it's a low chance of landing poisons. Extending the duration of debuffs is cool, but not needed. And the weakened, I don't know that I care. Now, if she hit like a freaking truck,
Yeah.
I'd be all about it, right? Like, if she can do the same kind of damage as those other champions, I'd be all for it. But I don't know that because I haven't really tested it. And my hunch, and I'm sure you're gonna support this, is that she does not. If I'm wrong about that, then yeah, go for it.
All right, so this is
You know?
interesting because I'm looking at the Hell Hades site right now and the ratings for her damage, and her A1 is average, her A2 is average, and her A3 is godlike.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
That's interesting. So I'm happy with the compromise because I can always do this later. I'm going to build Ashma into something. I'm just really interested and curious
Sure.
to see if she's ever going to be somebody to use. But for right now, it feels like you like Annex. He's got the 3-star blessing, which is a little bit better than the 2-star blessing on Fane. Why don't we build out Annex, build out Farrakhan the Fat, and if I have a problem with Magic Affinity, then I can always make the swap later.
Yeah, I think that works out. I think that works out good. One of the advantages I would say with Anax over Fane when combined with Farrakhan the Fat is they both have a decreased defense on their A1. So you're getting a little bit more consistency on that. That really is the only negative with Anax is that A1 isn't, super, super consistent.
Right.
But otherwise, really good champion for this. But I don't have an issue using Fane. I know you spoke like you basically spoke highly of Fane when breaking it down for me, and I was like, that makes sense to me. My experience is they're both pretty equivalent, but I usually give the edge to an axe. But it's
The
really
reason to use her today would be the fact that she's fully masteried, whereas NX is not. So rather than needing to spend gems to mastery him, I could just put Fane in now, right?
This is important, right? Free to play account, baby. You got to use what you got, what you have. Fane is mastered. We go Fane. Like that's a no brainer for me. I'm all about it.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So Fane and Farrakhan the Fat. So do we need to go back to the calculator now and replug those in and check the speed tune? Out of these two, because these are going to be the two, the DPS, they're running the slowest on the team. Do you care which one runs faster? Do you normally try to run like Fane first to get the weaken down, or you're like the difference is going to be like a point of 1 of a percentile, so I don't even care?
Here's the difference between who you want to have faster and who you want to have slower. Look at the turn order, look at the buffs that they bring, which one's going to affect the other one, right? So one of the things is having Fane go first is that when she reapplies the decreased defense in the weekend, Farrakhan will go right after it. One of the advantages of having Farrakhan go first is he'll place that increased crit rate and crit damage, and then Fane will go.
Right.
So it is a little bit of a coin flip as far as which one you'd want to do. I would probably recommend having Fane go first because getting that decreased defense and weaken to reapply, to me, is a priority. And one of the things you can do is as you go through, if you go through, you can actually look at the timing of her A3 and make sure it's always being placed at the top of the order. So like get yourself in sync when you go back down to like turn 6 or so. And you can see, look at the top of turn 6, Fane, there's an A2, A1, A2. Like if you just looked across the board, the A3 is being placed in the second attack.
Yeah.
Right? We want it to happen at the beginning of the turn. right? Because otherwise everybody's doing a bunch of attacks. So you could change the skill usage to kind of reflect that. If you have Feign in the slow spot instead of Farrakhan, she'll go up at the top area. She'll go before Farrakhan, so everybody's benefiting from that decreased defense and weaken for more of the fight.
Well, it looks like it's rotating anyway, but if we can put it up here, yeah, it'll be up top, A3s. Right, so all we need is a one-turn delay, I think, right?
My thing is that you see the 4 attacks that happens before she goes.
Yeah.
Those won't benefit from her having those debuffs up.
Like in every turn, right?
Yeah. Well, every other turn, right? Like her debuffs last for 3 turns. Yeah. They should stay up for the full fight. But let's assume, like, let's say it gets resisted once, right?
Right.
It's just, but these are like the little tweaks. So like, how do we get it just a little bit better? How do we get it just a little bit better? And you're asking like, which one do I want to go fast? Which one do I want to go slow? It's about optimizing as best I can. The other thing too, and actually, here's one reason why you might want Farrakhan to go first. Actually, shoot, I didn't think about that. Well, Demitha does the buff extension, right? So if you have Farrakhan do the A3 right before Demitha extends, that's pretty beneficial for everybody. Right. Now that all of a sudden that's lasting long. Yeah, so there's some thinking to go on there. So I don't know.
Yeah, and honestly, there also, talking to the viewers again, if you're newer into this, that consideration is down the line. Because you build it in either direction, see if it works, get your speed tune going. And it may be that either build gets you your 1 key and you don't care, do that first almost, it's like, if you're getting 85 versus 90 million, whatever, there are times where, for instance, I know, you're maybe at 70 million, 69 million, and you really want to push that 1 key, and then you have to worry about those tweaks. But if you're not there, then it doesn't matter so much.
Then it doesn't matter. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's go with Farrakhan the Fat as the fast DPS and Feign as the slow DPS. And I think we've got our speed tune. I want to make sure, let's see, it works here on Void. Does it also work on Spirit? On Void, it comes into tune, it looks like on turn 5. And against Spirit, it comes into tune actually faster on turn 3. Or turn 2. Which is nice.
Oh, it's going to be so nice. Farrakhan the Fat is 100% a champion you want to use, by the way. You're going to be able to have increased crit ring, increased crit damage up for the full fight.
Yeah.
On everybody but him, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah, everybody. Well, Seeker? Not Seeker. It's the only one.
But Seeker just drops it because of the extra turn. You can't avoid that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you will have it on. You'll have it on Seeker too. Oh God, yeah, it's gold. Yeah, super gold. Super gold.
Yeah, we'll have it up on column 1 and column 3, but not column 2. So he'll drop it some of the time, but he'll have it up the rest of the time.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So 2/3 of the time he's going to be hitting with it, which is great.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, it looks like he has it up.
Now you had me swap them. I'd swap it back. Put Farrakhan at the slow spot. Yeah. Then it should be up for the full fight for him, for a Seeker. Yeah, unless I'm mistaken about some of the skills.
Well, he's dropping it here, right?
Yeah, but it's after his attack. Like buffs like that fall off after the attack, so it should be fine. Yeah, because they're 3-turn durations. And Demitha is extending it twice over the duration of it. It's gonna work really nice.
It's the same. It's the exact same. Because up here on the top of the column, he has it in column 2, but not in column 1 or in column 3. And those are all A1s. So it's the exact same either way. Right. It's like he's going to hit 4 times, right? He's getting 4 attacks.
Yep.
And no, wait, I'm sorry. He's getting 6 attacks, and it's up for 4 of them. And it was up for 4 out of 6 before.
Okay, all right.
So it's the same either way.
You're right. You're smarter than me.
Not at all. But yeah,
you're right.
We were talking about the visual, like the reading of the visual aspect of the calculator. And that's something I've been working so much on. And So yeah, it feels good when I can actually diagnose stuff like that now, which I didn't used to be able to do.
Yeah. It's hard. There's so much stuff going on. It can be really hard to be like, wait, what's happening here? What am I looking at? Be a
But
real
it's,
trip.
once you've got it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. Like to build a tune like this without this calculator would be nearly impossible.
We definitely are gonna have to look at it. I'm a little concerned about Demitha potentially having too many buffs on. I don't think it's gonna be an issue, but it is something that we'll want to pay attention to as we go through it. I don't think it should be a factor. Oh, it won't be. Part of the issue is like Elva adds buffs when she attacks. And we want to make sure you can only have 10 buffs on your champions at any one time. But because Elva's going to be in the lead, I don't think this is going to be a factor at all.
She'll buff herself.
She should be in good shape. Yeah. I'm excited about it. This is great. You can build Thane at 70% crit rate. That's massive.
Yeah, that's going to be helpful
able to do that.
Yeah.
I think you can do the same thing for Demitha too. You should be able to do the same thing for Demitha.
Build Demitha at 70% crit rate?
Yep.
If I can get to the speed with 70% crit rate, which may be possible, but I don't know.
And you can do the same thing with Elva if you want to. I know you want to use her in other areas, so maybe you don't want to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think Elva will be as tanky as possible. And one of the things to consider, and this is something we were talking about before with like poisons, and how valuable are poisons in this case, and you're going so often you're going to fill up the debuff bar. Is a toxic set worth considering here for any of the champions, either Seeker, maybe because he's running so slow, or, maybe Demitha or Elva, depending on, what we've got available?
Yeah. Yeah, I would 100% consider it. It's hard. You probably want it on a non-damage dealing champion, right? So you're probably talking about Demitha and Elva, and at the speeds they're going, that's always going to be a bit of a challenge to be able to do. But yeah, if you can do it, I would. Not with this particular team, however. And the reason why I say that is because you're already getting plenty of debuffs from Fane, plenty of debuffs from Frog and the Fat, and the last thing you want to do is not get a decreased defense debuff because you have too many poisons up. That's just silly, right? So, as long as you're getting, somewhere between, 7, 8, 9, and debuffs already, you definitely don't want to add toxic to that. That's just going to overload things, right?
And one thing that I've learned in the past is that, like, for an unkillable team, you actually do really want to count your debuffs, because some you can't avoid. We bring Fane, she has a decreased attack. It doesn't play here. It doesn't matter, but it fills up a spot on the bar. Right. So we do have to consider things like that. Other, debuffs to consider are if you have like a decreased accuracy or a heal reduction, or those that don't really make any impact on your damage, they still fill up a spot on the bar. And so you have to consider them.
100%. Like, let's not forget Brimstone too. If you got Brimstone on your Elva, which 100% you'd recommend you'd want to have Brimstone on your Elva, that's another debuff, right? But we're talking already, we got 2 poisons plus an HP burn from Frog and the Fat. That starts at 3. Fane's bringing that decreased defense to the weekend and the decreased attack. That's another 3. We're up to 6. Plus, Fane also brings 2 poison debuffs.
Right.
Now we're at 8. If you add in a Brimstone, we're at 9. There's really no reasonable room for anything else to be added in there.
Yeah, good call. Okay. All right, so now we got to go build our champs, I guess. Right? We've got our champs.
Now it's about the build.
All right.
Yep. Fun part's over. Now we got to work.
Now we got to work. Yeah, we're going to suck it up and take it on the chin.
Oh my God. Can't believe I said that.